Welcome to the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is a new revision, returned with Max Justice last week. And this week we have Corey. He's a good friend of mine. I'll let Corey introduce himself. Go ahead, Corey.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I'm Corey. I've been in the cybersecurity world for a little while. Started off on the red side, got tossed into incident response, and have been on the blue side ever since. Yeah, I've built security teams and done stuff. So how about that?
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we've worked on a lot of projects together too. Luke, another good friend of mine, introduced the two of us together, and we've been working on a lot of cool stuff. It seems like every time you start a new project, I tend to rabbit hole right behind you, like with the 3D printing.
Yeah.
The cool stuff. So tell the listeners about your farm and kind of what you have going on in some of your projects, because I find that stuff like super interesting.
Oh God. Well, there's a lot. Where to begin? So the I'm a huge proponent of automation. I'll start there. So just in day-to-day life, everything that I do in cybersecurity revolves around automation in some way, shape, or form because it makes you more efficient. And because of that, it's really led me down quite a few rabbit holes. So I grew hydroponically for many years, many different varieties, aeroponics, hydroponics, ebb and flow. So you could kind of insert any hydroponic style of growing system, and I've pretty much done it or built it or whatever. So I'm a tinkerer, I guess you'd call me. And so where I'm at in my life cycle right now is I've learned a lot. I've done a lot of really, to me, interesting things, like really honing in on how a plant grows and making it as efficient and effective as possible. What I'm more about today, though, because I feel like I've gotten to a pretty good point with how I like to grow plants. I have my system set up so that it's just like clockwork almost. And a lot of the things that I've done so far has been analog automation. So it's like a timer that's plugged into the wall that you plug your outlet into for your lights and your pumps and your all of these things. And while that's really great and it works fairly well, I want to hone in and get even deeper into that. So I've been exploring moisture sensors that you put into your growing medium, how much water or moisture is on your growing medium. So then that led me down to how do I control environmental variables? And then the most recent thing is I want to tie all of that together because I'm building a greenhouse. And so basically I want to automate my greenhouse from end to end. I want it to water. I want it to run off of solar panels and battery backup systems. I want Arduino controllers everywhere, running on wireless, pointing to a dashboard that I can see what's the pH of my reservoirs, what's this, what's that. So that's kind of the life cycle of that. How about that?
So will you be giving guests access to that software?
Depends on the person. Actually, it'll probably just be anonymous. It'll be allow any anonymous access. It's fine. It's fine. Perfect. It'll be fine. Yeah.
The whole greenhouse on the internet again.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I have thought about, in all honesty, though, putting like a read-only version of the website up so that, people that are interested could go out and look at it. I'm not a developer. I'm not good at like visualization, but it could be fun. Could spark some imaginative thoughts and other people could take it and run with it maybe.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of cool stuff on the internet as far as people like accidentally putting IOT devices on the internet. I've seen fish tanks, I've seen irrigation systems, just an insane amount of IoT that people pop up with no cybersecurity or really no technology background, and it's sitting on the internet. There was one house that we were messing with that years ago that we were able to set the zones of this huge mansion and like set off the water with the lights inside the house and start making them, go back and forth. It was pretty funny. But it's amazing how many people will put that stuff out there and not even care about it, not even know that it's there, and get smashed.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so that's why this is kind of like scary territory, especially me working in cybersecurity, because I'm doing this I enjoy it. And I really we're my wife and I, we grow huge gardens. She's super into animals and stuff. Like we have alpacas, and she's diving into sheep, baby doll sheep now. And, you know, like all of this crazy stuff, I guess not crazy, but, you know, abnormal things, I'll call it. And so I'll be able to change and alter how much or what my pH is. And if anybody were able to, you know, successfully find a way into this, they could literally destroy my whole greenhouse. They could take the temperature up, they could drop the temperature down, they could add too much nutrients, they could stop adding nutrients, they could make my pH fluctuate, and everything that's connected to that system dies. So, and I think the other interesting thought about that is, okay, so, you know, I'm this home grower who's doing this as a thing. I actually think that in the future, we're probably going to see more things like this, these automated systems around our food supply systems, because we have to find new and alternative ways of, you know, growing our foods. We're going to run out of land and resources at some point. So the more we start to see these things crop up, the bigger the target they'll become. And you could potentially ruin an entire country by taking these out in, you know, in the long-term future. So
yeah, we were talking about that with Max Justice on the last episode about, you know, I brought up the point of, you know, we talk about greenhouses and, you know, fish tanks and small things on IoT hitting the internet. But what about food processing plants? What if that got hit? Like that would create a nightmare scenario. But not only that, but, you know, you talk about we're going to run out of land, but what about the fact that, you know, where you live was affected by that train derailment with all that toxic chemicals? You know, look at all the chemical and the toxic fires we've had just over the last month, and look at what that does to the soil.
Yep. No, 100%. That's why I'm not growing in soil.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, whenever you look at it, that you're really causing an interesting thought here, because whenever you start to look at things like that, you have limitations in any way. If I grow in soil, I'm limited to how good or bad that soil is. If I say want to go a different medium, I'm a big fan and proponent of coco coir. Yeah, it's as close to soil as you can get, but it is literally, you know, sterile. So whenever you look at that, there's impacts to the environment from that. It has to get here. You have to dry out the coconut husks with all of these crazy salts. And now you have to wash your coco coir once you get it and remove it of those salts. Where do those salts go? Like, it's this endless cycle of, okay, well, hydroponics are great. Perlite is another great alternative medium, but it's basically volcanic ash. Well, that means you have to take it from a volcano, right? Like, and get that here. And I'm nowhere near a volcano, at least that I know of. So whenever you start to talk about environmental impacts, there's always going to be these environmental impacts. And then furthermore, you talk about wanting to, okay, so I want to go sterile. I'm impacted by this train situation. My soil is definitely not in a great place, right? Because of that, which means, okay, what do I do? How do I get nutrients to my plants now? Well, I either have to A, produce them, or B, buy them and become a consumer of that. So what happens if my supply chain is disrupted for my nutrients? What happens if those nutrients are bad and I'm introducing terribleness, or something's wrong with them, or they get popped upstream and they don't know it until it's too late and they've shipped out of all of their products, and their products are too concentrated, not concentrated enough. There's so much reliance on everybody around you. And it's crazy whenever you start to think about that, how much I rely on everybody else in these completely different supply chains that you're not even aware of until you enter into them.
100%. And when you look at everything that's gone on, like geopolitically, you know, it not only goes back to those little incidents, but it all boils back down to geopolitics and how it affects every industry and what we have to do to divert the issues from supply chain and whatnot. And I remember, I guess it was about a year ago, maybe, China was sending packets of seeds to people unsolicited, and they were not native species. And everybody back then was like, wait a minute, why are we getting these random seeds? And then we start seeing balloons floating over the US and crazy shit like that. And it's like, there's an ongoing campaign to bring the empire down, right? And so what a great way to do it, by infecting our agriculture, going through these invasive seeds that they were sending. And people are mindless, they'll grab those free seeds and plant them away. Hey, I got some cool seeds from China.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, our agriculture's screwed. So there's like an ongoing war with that too.
Yep. Yeah. And so that's what was eye-opening to me, was diversity. So I'm a huge proponent of diversity in as many aspects as possible, right? So my garden is no different. I don't have one tomato that I grow. I probably have 20 that I grow. I like purple tomatoes. I like cherry or chocolate cherry tomatoes. I like my daughter's favorite is jelly bean. They're called jelly bean. They're these little yellow, super sweet. And then you want your beefsteaks, you want something for sausage, so you got to have all these diversities. And if you think about just the banana industry, there's like 2 varieties of bananas that we all consume. It might even be 1, but it is a very small amount. But if you actually go out and look at bananas, there's a massive variety out there. There's pink bananas. Pink bananas exist. They're pink. So I say that because we sometimes focus in on making this perfect tomato, this perfect banana plant, this perfect corn crop. But the problem with that is you have this one crop that's dominating your entire agricultural area. You receive an infected seed or something that could be diseased, and you've just wiped out that whole entire population of that individual crop that might dominate a huge percentage of that market. And so that's really disruptive. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, we saw that with the Asian carp too, when they introduced that into the rivers. Like, it totally destroyed, but it created some really cool fucking videos of people getting smacked in the head with carp.
It did 100%.
So
makes it worth it. Makes it worth it.
You brought up corn, which was really funny because I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast the other day, and he was talking about corn, and it really got me to thinking, of all the uses for corn, a lot of it's so negative, right? So you have fructose syrup. Corn, the body does not digest corn very well at all. Your body looks at it and goes like, what the fuck is this? And kicks it right back out. So really, what benefit does corn have to the human body?
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Corey.
To me, corn is an upstream thing, right? So I think, animal feed. It's like, that's what you would be hitting hardest by taking out corn, in my opinion, right? Like, this is an opinion. This is not a factual piece here, but from what I've seen, whenever you take out corn, the largest portion of the industry is like corn feed for cows, corn feed for chicken, right? If you look at chicken feed, it's scratch. If you look at scratch grains, the high content in there is corn. You look at those 2 major industries. So you have meat chickens, you have egg laying chickens, you have cows, you have, I'm sure that, pigs probably have some additive of corn in there. So if you start to look in it just and focus on one aspect real quick, which would be our meat industry, our poultry industries, our egg laying industries, disrupting corn could easily disrupt those feed channels, which means now you would have to find almost an emergency supply of food. Once the corn would run out, let's say, if corn were disrupted, what do we transition to? Because humans, what are we giving up? We're giving up corn syrup, which, okay, that's it's used a lot. I'm not discounting how much it's used, but you could easily switch because we have alternative sugars like table sugar, coconut. We got coconut sugar. There's so many alternatives out there that, okay, maybe we wouldn't be able to make it whole of what the market is today of corn syrup, but it could easily be gone, right? Like we could find an increase in other areas. From corn, like raw corn, we would lose out on cornbread, raw corn, eating grilled corn, like all these great things, but that could almost be like a delicacy. So to me, I think the heaviest hit impact is probably going to be things like that, or your distilling industries, actually, because they're very heavily based in corn or grain, right?
Yeah, that topic kind of gets brought up because, during this past, year or so with Russia going to war with Ukraine and the wheat and, the issue with that. And then all of a sudden there was issues with poultry, chicken houses burning up. And then just recently there was an explosion with, I guess it was a dairy house where like 1,800 cows died. Like, what the hell is going on with our food?
Right. Right. That's so crazy because I mean, if it's a dairy farm, we're going to lose out on all of those cows' milk, and that's an upstream issue too, right? There, you drink milk, you make cheeses out of milk, you get yogurt from milk. There's all of these like that's the beginning of a tree essentially that's just about to get disrupted. So it's really crazy to think about whenever you start looking at those individualized chains and how easily they could be disrupted.
Right. And from a cyber point of view too, I mean, it's like when you look at these things, I had a friend of mine ask me yesterday, he said, do you think that maybe either Russia or China has people inside the US that are doing these things, that are helping spur these explosions or incidents that affect our food supply or whatnot? And I said, it's not out of the question. They don't have any proof of it. I haven't heard any talk about it. But if I was China or Russia, I would absolutely look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of one of those limiting questions right now. A lot of people are starting to ask it, right? Because is it an inside job? Are there people in the country doing these things? Is it coordinated between inside and outside? Whenever you start to look at things like, especially PLCs, they're typically very, very, very dated systems. So if you think about a farm is going to have all of these, like automation controls that just are literally doing this one thing. It's opening a valve, it's closing a valve, it's opening a valve. And it's worked for 35, 45 plus years. It's been there. They paid a lot of money for it. It's there. All of a sudden that can now be connected to the internet so that, somebody can look at their phone and say, oh, you know what? I got this many gallons of milk this month. Or, and you can hone in on efficiencies and do all the great things that we do with IT products. But then all of a sudden you forgot that you just opened up all of your PLCs to the internet. And now all of a sudden this 45-year-old equipment that was out on the internet is now using 40-year-old, 30-year-old, 20-year-old exploits to just take it over. And what can you do with that? Could you blow up a farm? Could you stop milk production for a day? What's the impact of that? And that's really what I think. And we don't have visibility into it, right? Like, we're all sitting here, like you just said, what happened? What happened? I'm intrigued. I want to know, so we don't even have visibility into what actually caused that either.
And I don't think we'll ever get that visibility, especially if there's somebody else that's involved. And here's why. I was talking to someone that was a former agent the other day, and we were talking about China and the information that we're hearing coming out of China regarding the US and what we're doing. However, we don't hear a lot of that from this side of the pond. And there's a reason for that. And I want people to understand that when I talk about intelligence, I talk about stuff that affects national security. And there's a game that's played, right? So we expose national secrets from foreign countries constantly. That's the name of the game. But they also do it to us. And the reason why that we don't expose some of the things that we do find in the intelligence community is because of national security. And it affects that intelligence game back and forth. So that's why you don't hear both sides of the story. You have to go looking elsewhere. But yeah, those things, I don't know if we'll ever get a real read on what's going on right now, because there's so many things that are playing into the picture. It's like chaos, right? You got the balloons, you got fires, you have the train derailments, you have Hunter Biden's laptop, for Christ's sake. Like, who gives a shit about his laptop other than DC? Just all this chaos going on. And it's like in the background, then we have the precipice of World War III happening. And everybody's, told, go back to work, continue doing what you're doing. Don't worry about, the country. We're defending it. But I know on a cyber level, that hasn't always been true. And I think this week with the leaked documentation, I believe it was to Discord, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
A government contractor leaked national security information to a Discord channel to teenagers. And I just did a docuseries on gaming and the risk to kids. And this opens up a new Pandora's box, because now you have all these kids that are basically accomplices of this individual who brought that shit into Discord.
Yeah.
So expect some neat and unique consequences from that. But that whole picture that's going on, it's like, as cybersecurity professionals, we're pulled so many different directions. And you and I have both seen that with the IRs and the type of IRs and just the type of traffic. How do you think that's going to unfold as the war progresses?
So I think that going back, that's a really smooth transition, by the way, because you start talking about ICS, PLCs, IoT in general, anything OT, operational technology, anything in that whole categorization. I think let's be honest here. We as cybersecurity people, we're looking at OT, you go out to Shodan, and what's the first thing you learn on Shodan? Oh, wow, there's all of these cameras that are out there that I can just log into. And not that anybody would ever do that or go and view that or whatever. But my point is it all comes back to critical infrastructure at the end of the day. What if a government agency had cameras that were out on Shodan or Census, or insert another, insert another tool set that isn't based in the US, like ZoomEye, just saying. So you look at that, and all of a sudden I have security footage that I could use to track people's whereabouts. Do they have any like normal things that they do every day? What does their day look like? And I know that sounds a little bit crazy and probably even borderline paranoid, but the truth of the matter is if you've ever been on a red team, or you've ever listened to red team members talk, I remember back in the day, I was listening to this talk, and they were like, yeah, I just took a GPS and slid it onto their car, and then I just literally figured out that they go to this Starbucks every single day. And then I just went to the Starbucks and added it into, and you start thinking about that and you're like, wow, okay. But you have a phone in your pocket. Mm-hmm. So I think the way that this is going to evolve is in two areas. One, critical infrastructure, power, water, supply chain, food, all of that. That's going to be a major focal point of this from a attack and defense perspective. But I think there's also going to start to be some slides into our devices, our cell phones. I think that those are probably going to be the two biggest places, because if I compromise a cell phone, Mike, what can you do with a cell phone?
Some crazy shit.
That's right. That's right. I could turn on your microphone. I could turn on your microphone. I could start recording with your camera. Like
I could text your girlfriend, your wife, your mother, your sister.
Yeah, I could text anybody and it's coming from you, right? And what if you're in a government agency and I compromise your phone? I could turn on your mic. When do you walk into a meeting that you don't have your phone on you? How often does that happen? I mean, our government works a little bit differently, to be fair. Sometimes. But at the end of the day, even if I were going after a corporation that focuses on something that is critical infrastructure, right? Maybe it's a privatized critical infrastructure of water or sewage management, or, now all of a sudden those people aren't going to have the same level of security as every other organization or a government agency that requires it, or, there's so many different aspects to that. So that's what I would kind of, if I were to make a prediction, critical infrastructure and phones.
Cool. Yeah, I have to agree with that. Phones, I mean, look at the power that's in the iPhone, just some of the platforms that we have, the computing power is just unreal. So the next thing I kind of want to cover is, the use of these channels for disseminating intelligence, like the leaks, and also the Restrict Act, right? I don't know if you've seen the news about the Restrict Act and what it entails regarding VPN and really the verbiage behind it. To me, it looked like the Restrict Act was more focused on connection to TikTok than it was anything else. But I assume that the VPN industry is kind of scratching their heads and kind of gearing up for what may look to be some sort of fight, because they're targeting that type of technology.
Yep. Well, I think we need to take a step back. And by the way, what I'm about to say, I don't want to come across as a proponent of TikTok. I wouldn't call myself a proponent of TikTok.
Right.
But if we're going to start looking, I think instead of focusing in on a individual issue, what we're doing right now is we're kind of we're putting TikTok under a microscope.
Right.
I think that that's really positive. But my honest opinion is we're doing it wrong. We need to look at how all social media deals with your information, because, okay, this one's owned or ran and whole entity out of China or Singapore, or, it doesn't matter where in the world they are. Let's be honest. Is TikTok really doing anything different than what Meta is doing? At the end of the day, are they doing anything different? Well, I'll say it this way. I don't know. The proof might be in the pudding, though.
They're making more advertising money. And this is why everyone wants to shut them down, is because all those other platforms, Meta, all those other platforms are sucking right now when it comes to advertising money, because TikTok's bankrolling all the advertising money. That's where the real fear comes into play. It's not so much the information of individuals being spread to China, because US obviously doesn't give a shit about our information being spread because they allow big tech to do it.
Correct.
However, they are concerned about the money leaving their pockets and going to China for advertising.
So we have a lot of lobbying happening from our in-country social media platforms that are trying to force policy against an individual, for literally capitalistic reasons. There's no other reason for that, right? And so that's why I say we're doing it wrong. We're not doing what's best for the people right now. What's best for the people is to give me the option, put me in power of my information, and allow me to choose what a social media platform can or cannot see. And I actually would even push that as far back as to phone security.
Right.
That should be in my phone's security built into the OS to give me the option of what is allowed to be shared. And some people will say, yeah, that does exist, but not really to the degree that is necessary, right? Because it's kind of like an all sweeping type thing. Are you allowed to have access to my camera? Are you allowed to have access to my microphone, or only whenever the app's open? And then you see this research that some really smart people in our industry do, and you find out, oh crap, look at this giant tree of stuff that this application can actually touch, see, and feel. And so that's where we really need to have a better understanding, isn't what is TikTok doing, but what is all social media doing with our information? Because if we want to talk about security and truly walk towards secure, that's the best way to do it, and not focus in on, the one that's being lobbied against.
100%. I mean, if you look at Facebook has absolutely been guilty of everything that they're accusing TikTok of, 100%. But the only reason why they're not putting that same pressure on Facebook, is because they have hooks into Facebook where they can monitor that data. And they're not too concerned about where it goes, because they know they have a tap into it and they can access it anytime they want. However, with TikTok, you don't get that luxury, because it's going to China, and we don't have the right to that data. Even though it's our data, it's going back to their servers. It's just a weird scenario all the way around. I think that, and when we come up with the Restrict Act, we're creating a law or an act based on one company.
Yes.
And to me, that's epic failure, because we're microing down onto that one company, but yet the rest of the industry is running like the Wild West. So we're going to put all of our effort into this one person, make them go away. And then, but we still have this huge conglomerate of big tech who constantly can, screw our data day in and day out, and we have no control over it. And the government's like, oh, but that's okay, because they're Google and Facebook. It's okay.
Yeah, your data's safe with them. But even to your point about the VPN stuff, I mean, that to me is probably one of the biggest areas as a cybersecurity person that I see some of the largest conflict, even with myself inside. Like inside of me, I have some of the largest conflicts, because on one hand, I'm a huge proponent of like being able to be as anonymous and being able to be as, hidden as possible from the perspective of an everyday person. Now, I'm not talking about criminals here. I like being able to anonymize my data so that I'm not getting targeted ads. Like, let me give you an example. I go out to look at a gaming rig. like a gaming computer, all of a sudden my wife gets an email. I get 3 emails to like 2 of my email address, 2 of my different email addresses that are throwaways. Why? That's a little absurd, isn't it? Right. So I want to be able to hop onto a VPN and know that, my data is more in my hands than in my ISP's hands or my, whatever. It inserts somebody else that's not me that I don't trust.
Exactly.
How about that?
Exactly.
But then on the flip side of that, you have every time we make it harder for us to be traced, we make it harder for criminals to be traced, right? So there's always that like every time we make it better for ourselves, we make it worse for ourselves.
True. But, when it comes down to the way I look at it, I totally see what you're saying. The way I look at it is I'm not so much worried about the criminal aspect of it and the criminals getting my data. I'm more concerned about the government getting my data. Yeah, I want to stay hidden from them, because the way it looks right now, and I'll wrap it up with this. The way it looks right now with the government, it's a shit show, and they can't agree with each other, and they're constantly trying to cut each other's throats. It's like a policeman walking into a domestic dispute. Like, I'm not going to get involved in their shit because they're just going to turn on me. So I'll keep my distance and let them beat each other up. But yeah, I don't want them to have my data, because they can't even hold on to secret documents regarding the war and special forces. Like, that's scary to me. But I'm supposed to trust them with my data. I'll just leave it at that. But Corey, it was great to finally have you on the show. And we definitely have to do this again for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It was fun. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll let you get back to your busy day, and we'll talk soon.
For sure. I'll catch you
Bye,
later.
guys. Cheers.